next up, I get to welcome one of my best friends in the industry, Jim Kirsch, Senior Managing Director at AGP, has a few words for us. Jim is a phenomenal guy. He's done a lot of work in this space. AGP has supported this industry from its infancy, right? So Jim, come on out. Let's give Jim a round of applause, please.
Thanks very much, Patrick. And great honor to follow Isaiah as a kid from Chicago. To be able to be with him backstage and listen to him was just sensational, truly inspirational. Very quickly, because we want to get back on schedule, I want to welcome all of you here today. It's great to be back. Haven't been here since pre-COVID. Many of us have been talking about leaving the conference in 2020 and everything just going on pause. So it's great to reboot and start again. But what I would say is that this industry never shut down. This industry continued to serve the populace. And just like this industry, AGP as a bank has continued to fund these great businesses. We raised over $25 billion in 2021. A lot of capital for the cannabis sector as well. And we are looking forward to deploying more capital in the years to come. So going to see a lot of old friends here today and hope to meet a lot of new friends. And with that said, I'd like to introduce you to one of AGP's best friends, Mr. Boris Jordan, who we'll have a brief discussion with. Boris? Are we live?
Yep. Happy 420.
So Boris, let me just start the conversation by saying that it's a unique situation, unique perspective when you're a banker to have the opportunity to work with companies and their leaders who take a fiduciary responsibility to create value for all of their shareholders. When you're in a capital raise, it gets to be incredibly intensive and complicated, especially when you're dealing with cross-border cannabis, Canadian securities laws, U.S. securities laws, booking and transferring of stocks and equities. And you really see the true color of people during these times of difficulty and stress. And working with Boris, you see that he's been a person of extreme integrity, honor, and fairness. And it's been an amazing opportunity to work with him and his company and the amazing team that he's assembled. One thing I'd like to also say before we get started is that Boris and his company don't get a lot of press and enough time spent on the achievements they've made in social equity and equality, the investments that they've done, and how they stress it in every aspect of their business. And I think it's a model for every business to follow and every business leader to follow. So I want to commend you for that. Well, Boris, it's great to be back and be with you here in Benzinga. You're considered to be a pioneer and a visionary in the industry. And you know, a kid growing up in the United States and getting educated in the States and spending, you know, your formative years in the New York area, for you to, expand globally has really opened up the world to you for opportunities of investment. So I'd like to speak to you about the cannabis industry globally, starting with the United States and then moving into Europe and then down to South America if we have time. So because you've been part of this industry and you've had a vision for this industry, could you share with the audience today where you see the United States cannabis industry, how it's going to evolve, and how we could all create a lot of value here in the United States? And just touch a moment on the legislative environment and how you see that evolving as well.
Thanks, that's a pretty broad question, but I used to start years ago when I was building emerging industries. In Europe, I used to say I wake up in the morning, I sleep well at night, I wake up every 10 minutes screaming. Here I say I wake up every morning, my hands are tied, my feet are tied, and you have to sprint. And that's what the cannabis industry really is. You know, the cannabis industry in the United States has been built on the back of the fact that almost every regulator has tried to stop it. Almost every legislator has tried to stop it. The federal government continues to try and stop it. Everyone tries to hold back the industry from going. And yet, we've been able, all of us collectively, have been able to build a 25 to almost $30 billion industry in the last 10 years, against the will of most of the regulators in the industry. It's slowly starting to change. And we're starting to see an industry which is getting some level of support, certainly at the local level, but still difficult. At the state level, we're starting to see support. And I think pretty soon we're going to see it at the federal level as well. So, it's been a difficult 10 years, but I think now, and for many it's been a difficult 30 years because of the incarcerations, the terrible war on drugs. But for the industry, in its current form, it's been really a 10-year battle to build it up. I think the cannabis in the United States and the world is going to look very similar to the way other consumer products industries look. So I know everybody likes to think every industry is special, but I think actually that's what it's going to look like. Now, in the short term, we have our hurdles in that we have to manufacture in every state, we have to grow in every state, we have to distribute in every state. But for the most part, I think that where we're going to go is interstate commerce, large hubs for distribution around the country, and eventually moving out into the world at large. And the reason we decided at Curaleaf to go is that I'm always thinking 5 years ahead, where's my growth going to come from? And my personal view is that the United States, although at the beginning of its journey, is going to start seeing, and we're seeing it in some states, particularly limited license states, we're starting to see some level of competition. I think growth is going to start to slow a little bit. And so I was thinking, where am I going to get to growth 5 years from now? My investors want to know that this business is going to continue to have double-digit growth. And I know one thing about Europe. I built a very big data center business in Europe over the years. And I know that it takes a long time. The ramp up in Europe is much longer than it is in the United States. It's hard here, but in Europe it's even harder. And so it's mostly a pharmaceutical model in Europe. At the moment, it is moving to adult use in Germany in early 24. And I wanted to make sure we were there with our brands and with our people. And so that's why we made the investment in Europe, and we're starting to build out the infrastructure there, getting ready especially for adult use in Germany in 2024.
Great. So Boris, do you think, just focusing on the United States now, do you think that brands are going to be the future to create value, or do you see that as a retail footprint and distribution?
Listen, I think there's going to be value created up and down the chain. I think the hardest place to create the value is going to be in the agriculture side, because that's a largely commoditized business. I think there will be value created on the retail side as well. There will definitely be retailers that build their reputation around their cannabis distribution. But for Curaleaf, at least, I see it as an omni-channel business, like a Coca-Cola. I want to be able to distribute our brands. I guess that answers the question. Our brands to as many points of sale as I possibly can. And that's what we're building today at Curaleaf, albeit in a more difficult environment due to the siloed nature of the industry. But that's where I want to go. I want to have, somewhere between 5 and 10 very, very strong brands in separate categories of consumer products that we're going to push out to as many, retailers and buyers as we possibly can around the United States and the globe. And it's easier in Europe, because in Europe we can grow and manufacture in Portugal, and I can distribute to Israel, I can distribute to Germany, Italy, UK, hopefully soon to the Middle East. These are places we're already selling our products to. And hopefully in the United States will be similar to that, where we'll be able to distribute, to as many points of sale. But there will be people that will create, I think, value on the retail side. I don't really see, for Curaleaf itself, it's really going to be about a few large stores just to showcase our products. I could see us spinning out our retail business as the industry matures.
And as we talk about brands, we talk about ag tech and the value you said is going to be created, can you help us understand, in building a brand and the components with the brand and ag tech and the cannabis sector, how important is it what your product is outside of how you market and distribute the brand? And I'm getting towards the terpenes, the THC level, all of these flavor, taste, consistency. How important is the actual product going to be, both in taste and in efficacy and delivery?
Listen, that's a great question because something I really want to address. I think that the consumer's infatuation in many ways with THC is misguided. I think there needs to be education. To be honest, you get just as high, you have the same kind of effect at 18 to 20 as you do at 25. It's really about the terpenes, right? It's going to be about flavor. It's going to be about the effects of the terpenes, the entourage effect with the terpenes. And so, I believe genetics are a very important part of the business. So if you look at some of the best companies that operate within the agriculture space, but on the consumer side, whether it be tobacco or others, they own their genetics and then they hand out the business, the farming ag business to local operators, farms and stuff like that. So I very much see Curaleaf the same way. We are really focused on the genetic side. We're really focused on developing a very significant seed bank. You're going to hear from us shortly about investments we're going to make in that area because we think that's the future, is owning the genetics, owning the effects of those genetics, which is the terpenes, et cetera, building up those banks so we can provide different flavored products for our customers on a regular basis with variety. And that's really what you have to do. And if you look at the most successful, I hate the comparison to tobacco because it's a vastly different industry. But in terms of, the biggest, the best tobacco companies, they own the genetics in those businesses. They don't give it out to somebody else. They own them, it's proprietary, and then they use those genetics in order to be able to grow those products that they need to produce their products. So I want to be in the same position as Curaleaf. I think the industry's at a very early stage of genetics development. There's very few 99.7% stabilized seeds in the industry. There are people that are doing it. We want to focus on that, and I think it's going to be a very important part of the component of the industry. But mainly, not only for the smoking side of cannabis, but also for, and more importantly, for the formulated products. I believe the future is in formulated products. And that's where I think that the industry is going to go. It's about packaged, highly formulated products that meet the need states of our consumers. And that's really where Curaleaf is focused on. We have a very large R&D center in Massachusetts. We're building another R&D center right now in California. And California will focus on genetics. The East Coast largely focuses on our products. And it's about introducing new products to the market. Last year, we had 11% of our revenues came from brand new products that haven't been in the industry before. This year, we're targeting 15% of our revenue to come from absolutely brand new products. So we constantly want to introduce new products to the marketplace and attract new users into the cannabis space that don't necessarily want to smoke.
Interesting. And going back to this state-by-state regime, how difficult is it to get genetics and SOPs that you can replicate so that the consumer walks into Massachusetts to buy your product as opposed to California to buy your product, and they feel like they're getting the same taste, flavor, and efficacy?
So the real problem, there were two, up until recently, there were two problems. One is very few genetics have been, as I said, 99.9% stabilized. So for the most part, most of the stuff you're seeing out there changes month to month, and that's just a fact. So, but there are people that are very far along in that particular category, and that's where we want to be. So, and then the second problem was, legally you weren't allowed to move those seeds. Now, the industry does it all the time, but legally you're not allowed to do it, and I can't risk, the market cap of my company and the investors' money by violating those rules. And so for us, in a lot of our states, it took us a long time to get to a very stabilized product because of the fact that we had to start pheno hunting and creating seeds in all the facilities separately. So now that's changed. So the DA just recently came out with a memo, or I forget what it is, or an instruction that is going to allow us to move seeds between borders in the United States because the THC level in those seeds is below the level that the DEA saw as a problem. So now I believe the industry is going to have a leap forward in stabilizing the products and the flavors of those products and the quality of the flower state by state because of this new regulatory change. So I'm actually very bullish on that side of our business on the back of what recently was issued by the DEA.
And that brings us to the U.S. regulatory environment. 420, there was a lot of polls on cannabis and legalization. I didn't see one of the polls as I read through them today that didn't have a significant majority of Americans supporting decriminalization. So we will achieve decriminalization. It's just a matter of time until that happens. The question I have for you is, what does that look like? Do you believe that the state-by-state regime will be maintained and the states will still maintain ownership of their local grow, their local legislation? Or do you believe it will become a federally regulated regime where you can export from Texas throughout the United States?
Well, I think we need to separate the decriminalization issues away from the commercial issues. On the decriminalization side, there's been an enormous amount of work done at the state level, and I have to, hang my hat to a lot of the governors that are really moving towards decriminalization. There is one problem, though, that some states, even where they've decriminalized, like Maine, their databases aren't digitalized, and so they have to, the amount of work to actually expunge the previous criminal offenses is taking way too long, and it's too costly. And there they need federal help in that area, and I know that Senator Booker is working quite actively in hopefully getting, through the HOPE Act, some level of commitment from the federal government. And by the way, they need like $100 million, it's not that much, to help a lot of these smaller states in the expungement process, because it's not only about decriminalization, it's also about expungement. The decriminalization at the federal level will happen, I think, with descheduling, or maybe with something like the HOPE Act. But the fact is that most of the people that are incarcerated today in the United States are actually sitting on state laws and in state prisons, not in federal. Most of the people sitting in federal prisons are actually major drug dealers, right? Moving not only cannabis, but fentanyl and heroin, stuff like that. The people at the state level are the ones that have really been hurt by these laws, and that's where we really have to focus. But they do need some federal help and budgets in order to remove expungement. On the interstate commerce side, listen, I think that legalization in the United States is gonna happen in steps. I think hopefully this year, and I actually see some of the things, although I wanted to see Schumer come out with his law, and he told us all he was going to do it, but I actually see this as a bit of a positive, just being on the inside. Everybody knew he didn't have the votes. And so, now this thing is out of the way, because this was going to take time. I actually think now we can focus on safe, and I think we might, my view, I've said this to everybody, I think the bigger chances are in the lame duck session in November, when, and I've worked in Congress as an aide back in the 1980s, I can tell you that's when, in the lame duck session, Republicans and Democrats pass all the legislation that they don't want to pass during election years. And certainly cannabis at the moment fits into that category. So I do think we have a very good chance in the lame duck session. There are rumors, interestingly enough, I just heard yesterday that 65% of the senators and congressmen on the joint committee for Competes Act are cannabis supporters, 65%. So that we've never had something like that happen before. So there's a small chance that if Competes actually happens, and I think if Competes happens, it's not going to be over cannabis. Amazon is against it because of a lot of issues, and so they're spending a lot of money getting rid of Competes. But if Competes happens, I think there's a higher probability today than even 2 days ago, after what I learned yesterday, that we might get safe in Competes as well. But I'm still putting it at a low percentage. I think it's more of a end of year. And that's the first step. That's the first step. If we could get any federal piece of legislation that recognizes the existence of the cannabis industry, in my opinion, that's a home run. Then the next step will be taxes, 280E, and it'll be much easier to do that once you've broken the glass ceiling with SAFE. And then after that, I suspect we'll focus on interstate commerce and eventually descheduling. And I think it's going to be like a 4-step, maybe 5-step process. And in every one of those steps, I think you'll also have progression in a lot of the social justice issues that haven't been addressed. I don't think it's going to be any one bill. I think in each bill, you're going to see a progression in liberalizations and fixes that need to be done on the social equity side as well. So it's not going to happen over 1 year. I think it's going to be over 5 years. But I will say one thing. We've never been closer than we are now, and we've never had more support than we have now. And I'm pretty bullish on that.
That's great. That's great. Okay, so as we wrap up the United States, let's transport ourselves to 2040. how do you see the industry in 2040? Who controls the industry, and what does it look like?
Well, if I could answer that, I'd probably be sitting somewhere else.
Well, you are Boris.
No, listen, I can't. 2040 is a huge leap. You know, the only thing I'd say about that is this will be a mainstream industry, not one where you're waking up in the morning with your, a noose around your ankles and around your wrists and you have to run. I think it'll be a very different industry. I think it will be, unfortunately, I do think that the global consumer goods companies will dominate. However, I do think that there will be, 3 to 5 global cannabis operators in the consumer goods space that focus on cannabis exclusively. But the rest will be, because listen, Nestle's going to have it, Anheuser-Busch is going to have it. They're all going to have it, right? So they're all going to have components. They're just going to use the various cannabinoids in different ways within their products. It's not a rocket science here. So I think it's all going to happen. Plus, you're going to have synthetic cannabis that's going to come onto the market for the pharmaceutical companies. So there's going to be a whole progression, and that's why it's so important for the existing players to bulk up. And I'm not against the craft industry. It will always be there. I'm always hoping for innovation and entrepreneurship. But if we really want representatives of the cannabis industry to be able to compete with the global CPG companies, with their low cost of capital, their massive distribution, we have to bulk up. That's important.
Okay, so now let's go across the pond to Europe. You made a significant investment, the first MSO to really plant your flag in Europe with EMAC. Can you tell us about how you see Europe today and how you see Europe evolving, and of course, free to meld into their Israel and other components?
Patrick's about to put the cuffs on us, but I'll try to do this really quick.
The
regulators, you see? Yeah. They don't even let us talk.
Europe in 3 minutes or less.
Listen, I'm super excited about Europe. UK has the best medical law that I've seen anywhere in the world. Better than any state in the United States. It's an incredible law. Nobody knows about it, which is even better. And basically, we have free reign. So I'm super excited about it because 60 million people, very liberal medical law, direct-to-consumer capabilities under that law. Products, yes, difficult to get registered, but there's no restriction on product sales, on what kind of products you can develop there. So very exciting market. Just takes time to get it going. Germany, Klondike, 2024, 80 million people, adult use market. Obviously, it's going to have its growing pains and all that kind of stuff, but my opinion is that's going to be a home run market, $12 billion over 5 to 6 years, potential market. I'm very excited about it. Obviously, I'm not going to talk about those markets that are still small in medical, but Italy, Spain, Portugal, they're still small. But I think the way Germany goes, the rest of Europe goes. Israel, I love Israel. It's not Europe, but I love the market. I spend a lot of time there. I've been there twice in the first quarter of this year. I really think that's going to be a great market. They're moving quickly to liberalization. And last, I'll say, Middle East. I'm telling you, it's coming. I know everybody thinks it's not, but it's coming. I think that the UAE may be the first country in the Middle East to legalize medical, and I think quickly move to adult use. And so I'm very excited about the prospects. Egypt is a country that uses a lot of cannabis. So I think Europe is the next, and the European theater is the next big market for cannabis after the U.S.
Fantastic. All right, Patrick, we'll wrap it up. Mr. Jordan, thank you so much. Always great to be with you.
Thank you, Jim. Appreciate
Let's give it up. Thank you very much. Boris Jordan of Curaleaf, Jim Kirsch of AGP. Thank you, fellas.